Welcome back to the program. We are discussing Afghanistan's new government led by the president, Ashraf Ghani. Joining me from the American perspective is Kurt Volker, the former US ambassador to NATO. Kurt, thanks so much for joining us. Our last guest said that he felt that the Afghan security forces would be able to stand up as the Americans and other international forces withdraw. Do you think that's correct?
Well, let's just say that is our common goal. That's what everybody wants. Whether, in fact, that will be the case, I think we have to be very, very cautious. I mean, look what has happened in Iraq. In Iraq, you had a better educated population and force generally. You had more equipment, you had more time for training, and yet it has proven extremely difficult to hold that force against ISIS in Iraq. So in Afghanistan, it's our goal, but we really don't know. We have to proceed very methodically and very cautiously.
Are we seeing a resurgent Taliban? There's been some attacks recently.
Well, the Taliban has never gone away. We had a period maybe from 2002 to, say, 2005 when it was relatively calm in Afghanistan. A lot of progress could be made. But ever since then, we've seen the Taliban back and conducting attacks and intimidating parts of the population, conducting parallel judicial processes, governing some areas. And that's never really stopped. So I think that the Taliban has been in waiting, knowing that we have a deadline for our withdrawal. And as that deadline approaches, they're going to be more and more making themselves felt.
America's going to keep 9,800 troops there, but they're going to draw them down pretty rapidly to a very token force towards the end of 2016. Already regional countries like Pakistan and India have said perhaps that's too fast. What do you think?
I think it's too fast also. And I think the point here is let's not pick a date and say, by that date, we're going to be out of here. Let's look at what the conditions need to be, test, and see whether it permits a faster drawdown or a slower drawdown, but make sure we get it right. Let's not have another ISIS in Iraq.
What are the lessons learned from that?
Well, the lesson, I think, is that we should have kept forces in Iraq. We should have kept them in more substantial numbers, both to give confidence to the political process where the three parties would stay together, also to continue with training for the Iraqi military, and to be able to call in reinforcement when necessary. And that's very similar to the situation that we want to see in Afghanistan. We want to see this political process continue to succeed, as we just had with the presidential election. We want to see the training continue to develop for the Afghan forces. And should there ever be a need for reinforcement, we want our own people there to be able to help.
What about the political situation? Ashraf Ghani, Abdullah, behind the scenes, lots of rivalry, jockeying for position. Can they make it work?
Yes, they can. I have no doubt that that's possible, but it is a daily effort that needs to be made by both men to try to keep Afghanistan together. You have a Pashtun community that feels very strongly about supporting Ghani and his profile and what he means for Afghanistan. You have parts of the former Northern Alliance, the other ethnic groups in Afghanistan that are much more closely tied to Abdullah and very suspicious of having a Pashtun in power. And these two men, representing as they do symbolically these different aspects of Afghanistan, must work together to keep the country together.
What are the signs that we're on the road to success or failure, do you think, coming up?
Well, I think the fact that we got the presidential election behind us now is actually a very good sign. I personally had no doubt that Ghani had actually won just when you look at the numbers, even though it was probably a flawed electoral process. And I think Abdullah, in recognizing that, even knowing that it was flawed and knowing that he probably had a better showing than indicated, probably helped bring that together. Now we need to see the two of them govern in a way that's inclusive and cooperative.
What about the region? Because the US is keeping troops there. Others have said they would never bring in troops to Afghanistan, but increasingly Afghanistan is very important.
It is.
In the region for China, its new Silk Road economic initiative, for India too, and Pakistan.
Right. Well, and all for different reasons. China, I think, is very interested in some of the mineral wealth, copper, other access economically to Afghanistan, and it also wants to prevent the Taliban and a radical Islamic movement from infecting parts of China. India wants to see Afghanistan succeed as an alternative to a AFPAC or a PAC-AF that is radicalized Islam or strongly Islamic and opposed to India. And Pakistan, meanwhile, wants to make sure that it has a decisive influence inside Afghanistan. So these different rivaling conceptions of what Afghanistan means are all out there.
Can these economic initiatives by China, by India, and others help bring stability there where there wasn't any before?
Yeah, they can, because Afghanistan was a society destabilized by 30 years of war, and all of the things that would normally happen in the society, education, power generation, development of economy, employment, all of these have been destroyed. And we've seen rebuilding of this over time, over the past decade. We now have people have been in school for 10 years now, which had been lost for 30 years prior. So there's a lot of progress there. And I think getting the trade routes and the economic exchanges going from Afghanistan to India, Pakistan, and to the wider world is going to be tremendously valuable back into Afghanistan.
Your former US ambassador to NATO, what were the failures of NATO and the US in Afghanistan if you look back?
It's hard to know where to start. We did so many things that we wish we had done differently. I think that we should have gone in as NATO from the beginning. This was an Article 5 mission after the September 11 attacks, but the U.S. went in alone first, or with a handful of other countries. And then we gradually added allies to a coalition that was Operation Enduring Freedom without having NATO in. Then, when we were ready to start moving on as the United States, then we brought in NATO to take over ISAF and then start building in the country. I think that was too slow for bringing in the allies. They weren't invested in the operation right away.
So what was the effect of that?
The effect is that we never had the NATO commitment to success in Afghanistan that we should have had from the beginning. We had the potential to build that, but we never really made the ask of the allies, and they never really felt enfranchised. And so we were behind the curve as NATO from the beginning. And we did build up over time. We eventually did have ISAF expand over the entire country. And then we probably under-resourced the operation at every step of the way. We thought it was going to be peaceful. The Taliban came back. We ramped up, but more slowly than we needed to get a handle on the problem.
So you've outlined the problems and the failures of NATO and ISAF. How can the Afghan security forces learn from that? What do they need to do?
Well, Afghan security forces have a very clear challenge in front of them. I don't think there's any mystery here. They need to be substantial in number. They need to be financed. They need to be well equipped. They need to be well trained. They need to be multi-ethnic, and they need to be present throughout the country.
Are they?
Not yet. We're getting there. There's a lot of work been done, but I don't think we're anywhere near where we want to be with the Afghan security forces.
So you can see a problem where 2016 there's a token force left, but the Afghan armed services aren't ready?
Yes, I think that is a real risk, that the Afghan forces will be good, but not good enough. They will still be troubled by different ethnic divisions within them. They won't necessarily have the training or the equipment to be effective against the Taliban on their own throughout the entire country. And with an insufficient number of international forces to back them up, you could see a situation where the Afghan security forces splinter, and the Taliban takes over a significant part of southern Afghanistan, and the military forces retreat to Kabul in the north.
So do you think the Obama administration might be facing, a year or two down the line, ramping up security as they have done in Iraq?
Here's what I would like to think. I'd like to think that we keep this issue open. We all want to draw down from Afghanistan. We all want to see the Afghan security forces succeed. We want to see the politics and the economy succeed. So let's just keep it open as to what's necessary from the international community in terms of security in order to allow that happen, and not try to make this happen by a date certain.
Kurt Volker, former US ambassador to NATO, thank you very much.